Maggie Carter is a barista at a Knoxville Starbucks, at the Knoxville Starbucks location that is unionizing. The Starbucks location that is unionizing with Starbucks Workers United, the latest in a wave of Starbucks unions of Starbucks workers to file for union elections across the United States. I mean, at this point, we literally have, like I mentioned in the last show, we literally have Starbucks union elections happening from sea to shining sea, from New York to Washington, from Colorado to Tennessee. It is beautiful. I love to see it. And so I'm so excited, Maggie, that you've taken the time out of your extremely busy life to talk to us today on the Valley Labor Report. Maggie, thank you so much for your time.
Jacob, thank you so much for having me. What a lovely introduction. I'm so grateful to be here talking to you this evening about our union campaign that we just went public with right before Christmas.
Yes. Yeah, that was a great Christmas present for me anyway.
I'm so glad to hear it.
Do what?
I said I'm so glad to hear that.
It's
amazing to see.
It was all for me, right? The reason that you the reason that you're
100%.
forming a union there is because you wanted to make me happy.
Absolutely, to be here on the Valley Labor Report, you already know.
That's right. So, Maggie, you are a barista at the Knoxville location that is unionizing. What were the first things you mentioned when we talked yesterday that you've been working there for like 2.5 years or something? What was when was the first time that you thought that, oh, like I should do a union about this?
Well, I'll be honest. It was shortly after I heard about the Buffalo campaign. I heard, about the issues they were advocating for and what really solidified their campaign together as far as unionizing. And it just really resonated with me. I instantly empathized with everything they were discussing, from short staffing to product shortages to the pandemic and everything in between. I mean, it's just really hard when you hear those things laid out for you to ignore it. I mean, once you hear things like that, especially being the type of human being I am, I feel that it's necessary to advocate for these beautiful human beings that I have the pleasure of working with.
So that's the first time that you like thought about it was it kind of like a light bulb moment? Like, oh, like, because you mentioned that there have been problems, since you've been working there. Obviously, you work in the service sector. I mean, what service sector employee doesn't have like a laundry list of complaints? But before the union election at Buffalo, like, what was your attitude towards those issues that you had in your workplace?
I'll be honest, I was almost withdrawn in that aspect, because it just becomes, your opinion becomes so small after the time that I've spent working there and giving advice and saying, maybe if we put this there, it may flow better when we're in peak operating times, things like that. Saying that enough times and having that ignored consistently because someone else feels like it should be done better, who is not on the floor working every day, that kind of, for me, is what really sparked it as well, is just the lack of recognition of partners under, our store manager and corporate levels not ever being listened to or respected in that sense.
Right. Yeah, that's something that I find talking to service workers. I was a service worker, as a lot of people that listen to the show know. I worked in a restaurant for 3.5 years, and that attitude of kind of complacency, of maybe complacency isn't the right word, but just like not feeling undervalued and almost kind of feeling like that is the attitude that you ought to take to yourself. Like, oh, management undervalues me, I guess that means I'm not valuable.
Absolutely. And it's very disheartening to see that, more importantly, to see that feeling ignite in someone else that you care for, because obviously, for ourselves, we typically push things to the side, or, we'll deal with more things that, when it's ourselves. But when you blatantly see it happening to other people, and you see people getting bullied out the door, essentially, that kind of ignites that fume as well, to just completely take charge on this aspect and advocate for these lovely human beings.
Yeah, and that's, that I mean, that's the way that you're gonna that we're gonna fix things in this society, because like I said, as we've seen, politicians have been extremely reticent to to come to our aid. As I just mentioned, the OSHA department is rescinding some of their temporary safety protocols in the largest, so like we have to protect ourselves, and that's what y'all are doing there. Can you talk about what are some of the issues that y'all faced that when this light bulb moment went off, like when you had that light bulb moment, what were the things that, like, okay, I want to fix, like, this is a problem that I've had for a long time. I know that it needs to be fixed, and I believe now that, like, I can actually fix it. What were some of those things that you've had to deal with as a barista at Starbucks?
Absolutely. Throughout the pandemic, that obviously exacerbated, health and safety concerns on the floor. There was multiple times where certain protocols weren't necessarily met to the best of our ability. And also anything from wages to benefits to safety to training. I mean, adequate training at our store is a huge issue right now, especially scheduling, honestly, due process in the workplace, and not just having all of your, your reprimands or your disciplinary actions only happening to you at a certain level and not happening to offenders at a higher level than you. Think just accountability on all levels for all parties involved, and a true partnership is what we're advocating for.
Right. Yeah, that and this is a good, Starbucks likes to have this progressive face, right? And Howard Schultz, I think the founder of Starbucks, former CEO, he, ran for president, ran as a Democrat, and he was actually Hillary Clinton's top pick to be the labor secretary had she won. I mean, man, that would have been great, right? So they like to have this progressive, I care about my partners, kind of mentality, or that's the way that they like to face publicly, but that's not really what you've seen on the inside.
Absolutely not. At every moment, it's kind of crazy. You can't claim to be a progressive company and then engage in all these union busting antics following that, when your workers are advocating for their rights as humans and as baristas and quote unquote partners. It's honestly, they have infiltrated my store instantaneously, and all of a sudden began, doing things we've never seen them do before. Things like taking out trash, things like doing dishes, things that have been broken are suddenly miraculously able to be fixed in a week's time. Whereas, these issues have been happening for well over 6 months, and they were never addressed until we went public with our campaign. So it is kind of funny to see them try to maintain this progressive face in society. But when it comes to the baristas that put, work tirelessly day in and day out to quote unquote make the moment right for every customer who comes through, we don't really have that ability right now, and they don't doesn't seem like they want us to. Right.
Yeah, well, that's, we've seen places that like to be progressive facing do some of the same things that you're seeing at Starbucks. Even places that like to portray themselves as radical. I mean, they're so, No Evil Foods is like this like socialist vegan meat substitute company. And and they replaced an entire department and contracted it out because they tried to unionize. And they were talking about how, like, oh, unions are like sexist and racist and all of these things. And there's this environmental nonprofit in West Virginia that they attempted to unionize with the industrial workers of the world, with the IWW, which actually the IWW had a Starbucks campaign about a decade ago that saw a good amount of success, and they just literally shut down the nonprofit. And so, like, a boss is a boss is a boss, and they're gonna be, no matter what they say about their progressive ideals, the way that you're gonna tell them is you'll know them by their works, as the Bible says. And so many bosses, they have the same works, and it's all anti-union, it's anti-worker, it's not progressive. It's none of these things that they want to pretend that they are. And but this isn't like a nonprofit environmental thing where people are doing, this is like a business, and y'all are making Starbucks a lot of money. I mean, can you talk about, like, how much business y'all see in a day, that y'all actually, like, the money that you make for Starbucks in a normal day?
Well, I can't I'm not a shift supervisor, so I don't necessarily see the sales behind the scenes. But from what I was told, we are the second biggest Starbucks in our district.
Wow.
Compared to, there's one in the university that's like right by the university, and that one is, I believe, the only one above us in sales. We're right off the interstate, so we get a lot of traffic going towards like Asheville and North Carolina, things like that. So, we're right there off the interstate, so we get a significant portion of traveling traffic. And from what I've heard, we're upwards of like a $5 million a year type store. So.
Ooh. Wow.
And we've been in operation for 16 years. And, the people that have been in charge have been in place since this store opened its doors. So it's a lot of the original establishment, management that's still in place today.
And so the management that you've had at your store, you mentioned some of the is there anything more to their reaction to the campaign other than, like, they've been being a little bit nicer?
We've been seeing them a lot more frequently, which is, whereas before we would see them maybe once every 2 to 3 months, just a pop in, a hey, hi, how are you? Now we're seeing them multiple times a week on the floor, picking up things, working on the bar with baristas, hammering them for drink recipes as they're trying to keep up with the busyness of peak. So we've seen a lot of that, and we've seen quite a few, support messages posted in our back room that have all of the numbers for our direct superiors up to our regional vice president, which is something we've never had access to before. And they've also utilized their emergency email services to be able to email our personal accounts to let us know, that they're not anti-union, but they do believe that we have a better relationship, partner to partner, and things like that. Very similar to the things that are going on in Buffalo.
They're using their emergency alert system to send you anti-union messages?
Absolutely. And they've even done that with
insane.
Text messages in Buffalo. They haven't quite reached that point with us, but I do expect that as we get closer to our vote, things will ramp up.
Wow, that's crazy. I would expect like text messages, but to use your emergency protocols to send anti-union messages, that's like pretty slimy. So what about the reaction from workers on the floor? Like, how have how has the store been taking it? How have the workers responded to you mentioned that you first kind of decided, okay, I'm going to unionize when you heard the Buffalo news. I'm assuming that this was kind of a pretty similar sentiment across the store.
Oh, 100%. I mean, it was not a difficult task once I realized, I guess, that all of my team was actually paying attention. I'm sorry if you hear my dog in the background. But my team was paying attention, and, they were aware of what was going on, and they said, this is something I'm interested in. And I'd been keeping up with it from the beginning. So once I realized that we had enough interest and support in our store, we started signing cards, and 3 days later we had an astronomical amount of support. I mean, it would be a shock at this point for us to not secure it. But I mean, obviously nothing is final until the final cookie crumbles. So
right, of course. And so that's awesome that it's come together so quickly. Can you talk to us about Workers United, their support for your campaign? You mentioned that they've been really good to send you supplies, give you directions. You mentioned that they have already given you anti-union bingo cards in preparation for the listener sessions. That's so cool. How have they been to work with?
Oh, it's been amazing. It's been absolutely monumental for us to have their support and the ability to just be able to share all this information with my partners ahead of time, to be prepared, because fortunately Starbucks is not being as strategic as they could be in handcrafting these messages store to store. It's a lot of the same regurgitated information. So they've done a really great job with taking us under their wing and ensuring that we're prepared for any obstacle that could come our way, which has really allowed me to make my baristas more comfortable, my team more comfortable facing, these corporate managers who are only there to intimidate them and potentially get them to negate themselves for the company.
Right. You mentioned that some of the things that talking to the union and the workers in Buffalo, it's been basically exactly, they have exactly almost word for word predicted what management was going to tell you. What was that like? For yourself and for other workers, knowing that, these people know what they're doing. The boss is predictable. They're going to do this and it's all lies. How did it feel hearing the what the union was telling you be validated in real time and in person?
Oh, it was amazing, because it made me realize genuinely that, we are fighting a winning battle. It made me realize that these people are predictable. They only have one path to, try to convince us, and that's simply not happening. So it has been absolutely pivotal in this process to be able to get ahead of what they're doing and also garner, trust in the process for the union, because down here in the South, there's really just not as much communication and education revolving unions. And so that was a huge part of this process for us.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure that y'all are all learning 99 to nothing, whole lot of new information coming at you, I'm sure. What has it been like talking to the Starbucks workers at other locations that are unionizing and that have unionized? Like you mentioned that you've spoken to some of the workers in Buffalo. What have they been saying to you about how they're feeling pre and post election and everything that they've been going through?
Well, most importantly, they've given me absolute just support throughout this entire process and guidance when I needed it most. We are all partners together. No matter where your geographical location is, we all work for Starbucks and we're all partners in this together. So fortunately, it is so nice to be able to have, these partners who have been here for so long, who can help put two and two together and really help us get through this campaign and fight some of the biggest anti-union tactics we've seen in 2022.
And so as we wrap up here on the radio, we're going to continue talking to Maggie. If you're listening to us online, if you are listening to us in Muscle Shoals and you want to hear the rest of our conversation, you can find us on YouTube at The Valley Labor Report, or you can listen to our podcast when it comes out later this week. We're going to continue talking to her after we go off of the radio. But to close out, there are probably, I would hazard a guess that there's probably a Starbucks worker listening to us that is wondering, okay, like this sounds good. What are the next steps? Who do they need to get in contact with if they wanted to begin an organizing campaign at their store?
Absolutely. So a great tool is to get on Facebook or Twitter and reach out to Starbucks Workers United. They do respond very quickly to any messages. I also have my personal Twitter account. It's actually Storm Carter 23, all one phrase. You can reach out to me anytime. I will be of any support that I can be. So yeah, those are great places to reach out. And the email for Starbucks Workers United is also attached to the Twitter account. So
awesome. That's fantastic. So, folks, you heard her reach out to Starbucks United on Facebook, Starbucks Workers United on Facebook and on Twitter, and you can reach out to her personally on Twitter at StormCarter23, all one word on Twitter, if you are a Southern or if you're any Starbucks barista and you have questions about the process going forward, you can do that. Thank you, Muscle Shoals, for tuning in to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. You've been listening to me talk with Maggie Carter, a barista at the Starbucks location in Knoxville, Tennessee, that is unionizing. And like I said, if you want to hear the rest of the conversation, you can find us online, and we will see you next week. And for the rest of you, you're seeing us now. You're still seeing us, and we're still talking to Maggie. Isn't that crazy? So, thanks for sticking around, guys. I appreciate it. I appreciate everybody listening. So, Maggie, I wanted to talk some about some of your personal, some of your personal relationship to unions. You mentioned that education about unions and organized labor in the South is extremely sparse, and I could not agree more. When I graduated high school, I couldn't have told you with any kind of coherence like what a union is, what a union does, why it's good, or even why some people think it's bad. I just didn't know anything about them, basically. So what is your personal relationship to unions and the labor movement? Did you have parents that were in unions, or just talk about that for a bit.
I'll be honest with you. I was like you. I mean, I didn't really have any type of union conversations with my family members until recently, which is wild. But my dad has actually worked for and been employed by GM for the duration, pretty much the entirety of my life since I was about 5 years old. So he has actually always been a part of the UAW. So this actually did bring along a quite interesting conversation for us pertaining to unions, because he is not necessarily on the same side as I am regarding them.
Oh, no. His position is a bit negative then?
Yeah, and I think it's because there's a difference in the size of the unions and how it affects each differently. So I still would, and when he told me what, the UAW was and things about it, me being a little left leaning, I was able to kind of poke holes and see that that's really just his more modest upbringing, I guess you could say, more in the middle,
Right. Well, I mean, the on the show, we are. I made a joke earlier that I'm kind of a union partisan, and I am, because I think that's the right position. But I'm not like stupid. I understand that unions are they're human institutions, and as such, they're going to have flaws, and they're going to have flawed iterations, and I think that there are things that some unions can do better, like the UAW. And one of the things that I have been really heartened to see out of the UAW specifically is that they have a really vibrant reform movement. Unite All Workers for Democracy, UAWD. They actually won recently a referendum to elect their top leadership by direct vote, by direct ballot, one member, one vote. Previously, they were elected by delegates, and that allowed the kind of establishment administration caucus to rule over the UAW for decades and decades, and allowed them to get really close to the bosses. And there was a lot of corruption. Multiple people in the International Executive Board have gone to jail because of their corruption. And that's not that, like I said, that's not something that we shy away from. And people that do that, people that take dues money, should absolutely be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. They shouldn't do that. But even where there are these kind of flaws and flawed iterations of unions, that is still better than not having a union at all. Think about I'm sure that your dad working, and I don't know, I don't know your dad, but I'm sure that he would rather work at GM than, say, like a Hyundai plant, right?
Absolutely.
And the reason for that is the UAW. For all its flaws, he's making, I don't know, $30, $40, $50 an hour, something like that. And people at Hyundai, people at the Toyota Mazda plant here in Huntsville, they're going to start off making like $15 an hour, like $12 an hour, something like that. That's crazy. And, that's like, so for all its flaws, the UAW has done a lot of good for people.
Well, that's good. I'm glad to hear that. And as we discussed it further, I could kind of see that. Like you said, it's natural for any entity to have flaws in a sense. So that was kind of the direction I took it as well. But after our conversation, I did say, well, I do think that the UAW is more vital than you necessarily realize at this point. But, that's okay. And we kind of left the conversation there.
Right. So, but he didn't really talk about it with you when you were growing up at all?
No, definitely not. I had little to no knowledge up until this experience. And I've gone from little to no knowledge to organizing an entire campaign. So I'd say that's pretty amazing for a short amount of time. But,
I would say so.
It's been a lot of work. It has been a lot of work behind the scenes.
Yeah, I would say so. That's that's definitely a really big progression. Not knowing much about about unions to leading a campaign at your store, but that's really cool. And so what about you? What about you personally? You mentioned to me yesterday that you're in college. And so talk about that and some of like how you see this campaign in your kind of life trajectory.
Absolutely. So yeah, I actually just received my associate's degree in general studies, and I'm moving on to the University of Tennessee, studying a broadcast journalism is what I'm loving. That's what I'm feeling like is going to be what I settle down on. And this has actually sparked a huge interest for me that I didn't necessarily realize that I had in the workforce and labor reporting, as far as, that is concerned. And just many other interests has opened up for me through this process, because I really intended to go in this lane of covering sports professionally. But now this has kind of opened up more doors for me and made me want to maybe get into some more serious topics instead of just, fun and games.
That's awesome. That's really cool. That is such a similar story. I don't know if you know of Kim Kelly. She is a labor reporter, and she started out, she was for years a music reporter. She reported on music for a long time for NPR and all this, and for Vice. And she got involved, like you, in a union campaign at Vice, and that kind of sparked her interest in labor journalism. And so that's what she's been doing for the last several years. And she's been one of the only people reporting on the coal miner strike here in Alabama. She paid a lot of attention before anybody else did to the Amazon campaign here in Alabama. She is a great friend of labor and a really good reporter, really good journalist, really good writer. So I think that you would like her if you checked out her work. But that's awesome that you've got that. This has kind of sparked your interest in something more interesting. Although, like, sports is or something maybe, I don't know, maybe more important. But sports is fun. People should have, and people deserve to have fun. So that I don't want to discount that either.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, I'll definitely have to look him up.
Yeah, definitely. So, broadcast journalism, and you're going for a bachelor there. You've got your associate's degree. How did you start working at Starbucks?
I actually started, it was after my first semester of college, actually. And I was like, well, this seems like a good because I'm a single mother also. So benefits are obviously something that I need from a position, and it's not very often that you find a company that offers part-time benefits. And it's kind of funny looking back, I kind of see those a little bit differently now after working for Starbucks for a little over 2 years. But I'm very grateful for the benefits that they offered me as a part-time worker. So that was what really attracted me to Starbucks, really honestly.
Right. Yeah, and just because, there are things that you'd like to change, that doesn't mean that there aren't some things that are good. One of the things that I've said to people that have been kind of hesitant about campaigns in their workplaces is that, the things that you like can be taken away at any time without any notice, for no reason or for any reason at all if you don't have a union contract in place. And so through unionizing and bargaining a contract, you can set in stone, in black and white in a contract, the things that you like, and you can try to improve on the things that you don't like. And so you can kind of get the best of both worlds there.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're trying to do. I mean, I just went blank. I had a whole thing that I was going to say. That, don't you love when that happens?
That's my favorite.
But yeah, I mean, that was one of the things leading up to this that really resonated with me and made me want to, embark on this journey with the campaign is just, I'm sorry, what you just said was about, can you just repeat the last second and maybe that'll.
Yeah. I was talking about how, through unionizing, you can actually, you can set in stone in black and white in a contract the things that you like, and you can improve on the things that you don't. And it doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't some things about the workplace that are good. It just means that you want to actually have that security about the things that you do like.
That was perfect. Thank you. You exactly reminded me of what I wanted to bring up. So the pandemic actually really exacerbated those feelings for us personally in my store, because Starbucks did offer additional benefits that were only localized to partners who opted into working during the heightened level of, I guess, unknown surrounding COVID when it first hit back in 2019. But what 2020? What, I'm so lost. But they gave us an option to stay working or to go home and receive a paid leave. And for those who opted to stay working on the floor, they received an instant $3 pay raise that only lasted for those 2 months that you worked. So as soon as people started coming back, the people who worked when it was so unknown and put themselves at risk for this company, that was instantly taken back away from them.
Wow.
And so that really showed a lot of us how easily Starbucks could, process changes like that, and how easily they could take them away. And the same goes for our free coffee and food markout, or not coffee markout, but we had a free drink and food item markout that we could receive any day, whether you were working or whether you're not. And they have taken that away too, as a result of, I guess, this next phase of moving out of the pandemic, although I don't really ever feel like we've moved out of it,
Yeah. That's crazy. I remember going back and forth on free food or not free food all the time at my workplace. And it was and it's funny because like we were treated like crap by customers and by management, and we had terrible hours and we had terrible pay. But one of the things that made people most mad was when management would try to tell us that we can't have a free meal, or the worst thing that I can remember them doing is they literally wanted to charge us for Coke. They wanted to charge us for drinking fountain drinks. I mean, like, I did the numbers for the store. I was an assistant manager. I didn't have any like higher fire powers or anything like that. They basically just gave me that title so that I could close up at night. And I did the groceries. I did the numbers. Like the amount that it costs the company for a worker to have a cup of Dr. Pepper is negligible. It's like 5 cents, and they wanted to charge us $1 for it. I mean, it made people so mad, and nobody did it. Everybody just drank it anyway. But it was very frustrating that time that they were trying to make us pay for it.
Well, and that's similar to what we deal with, because we as baristas, we know what the waste level is in our store. We are very aware of it. We are constantly the ones throwing food away, throwing coffee away, or pouring coffee down the drain, pouring milk down the drain. I mean, there's so many situations where we remake things for customers and we pour it out. We do it like 4 different times, but a simple, me being off work and wanting an iced coffee, I shouldn't have to pay $4 for an iced coffee as someone who works here consistently,
Yeah, that's just that's so crazy. It's like the smallest thing. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and it's not even like I'm owed this or anything like that. It's more so like you gave this benefit, and it was such a small effect on your bottom line, such a minuscule thing to do, but it meant so much to us to be able to do that, and then for them to take that away, it just really really showed that they could do that at any point in time, and we have no say in anything.
Right. Yeah. And that's exactly right. And it's very, very, very frustrating as a service worker, as somebody who worked in the restaurant in that kind of precarious place, to have just those little kind of amenities taken from you, like for no reason. And especially when you know that it costs basically nothing to the company. You mentioned that you're a single mother. How is your kid? How's your kid taking this? Does he know much about what's going on? Like, what does he think about all of it?
He loves this. He loves that. Every time we walk into my Starbucks, he has grown up kind of around Starbucks because I've worked there for almost 3 years now. But he loves seeing all of our partners and everyone that we work with flocking to us when we walk in the door, because it's always a very warm welcome. And, it's really funny how they pick up on what you have going on when you're having conversations around your child. So, of course, anytime, Starbucks comes up, he's like, yeah, Starbucks Workers United, let's go. It's time to unionize. It's really funny, the stuff that
That's
kids
awesome.
pick up in passing.
Definitely. All right. Well, Maggie, is there anything that you wanted to make sure that you mentioned before we let you go tonight?
Well, of course, it's always imperative that we mention that Starbucks is engaging in, union busting, and they are not collectively sitting at the table to bargain with us in recognizing the fair election principles that have been put forth in 11 and counting stores. I believe the total is up beyond that now at this point. So, really all I can say is that we're asking Starbucks to negotiate with us, and we're hoping that they're going to do so in good faith. So it's always imperative to bring up, that they have not engaged in that so far in the stores, and recognize the union that has formed, and recognizing these campaigns that are forming. It just would be really great to hear that those fair election principles were recognized and adhered to.
Right. And I've read the principles, and they're not like crazy. I mean,
not at all.
Yeah, it's totally reasonable things that you would do if you were actually interested in treating your workers like partners. Yeah, and so somebody in our chat in YouTube was asking if there's anything that people can do to help.
Absolutely. So anything, the best way for you to help is if you are, local to Knoxville, coming by the drive-through, take up space for a minute, throw a nice little tip in the jar for the baristas working that are under extra pressure right now, because they are intense at our store, and it is very difficult to work in that sort of environment. And another thing that you can do is you can call Starbucks themselves directly, call their customer care line, and let them know that you won't be entering any Starbucks that they refuse to, any Starbucks that is unionizing that they refuse to acknowledge or bargain with. That would be really powerful for if we all took a stand collectively.
Right. And what is the store number in Knoxville that y'all are organizing with?
Yeah, so my store is store number 9780. It is located on Merchant Drive in North Knoxville.
9780 Merchant Drive in North Knoxville. Call the customer care line. Tell them that you support the Starbucks workers. Go by an Organizing Starbucks and let them know that you support them. Give them a good tip. And finally, one last time, if there's somebody that's just jumped in, if you're a Starbucks worker and you're wanting to organize, who should they reach out to?
Absolutely. So you can reach out to me at StormCarter23 on Twitter, and you can also reach out to Starbucks Workers United on both Twitter and Facebook. They're really responsive to messages, and they get back to you within hours. I mean, that's how I reached out to them. And there's also Starbucks Workers United at gmail.com. It's just SBWorkersUnited at gmail.com. That is the email for the union directly.
SBWorkersUnited at gmail.com. Maggie, thank you so much for talking to us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, Jacob. It was a pleasure.
Support for this program comes from the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 136 out of Central Alabama. Learn more at IBEW136.org.